Good afternoon and welcome to the WEIM Governing Body General Session Meeting. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and all attendee lines are currently muted to reduce background noise. There will be time for public comment throughout the call, and we will make sure to provide instruction on how to enter the comment queue at that time. With that, I'd like to formally begin today's call and turn it over to Chair Andrew Campbell. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Silas. So welcome to the March 19th meeting of the Western Energy Imbalance Market Governing Body. Thank you for joining us in person and virtually today. So now I'll turn it over to Corporate Secretary Roger Collinton for the roll call.
Thank you, Chair Campbell. We'll start with you, Chair Campbell.
Here.
Vice Chair Konzioka.
Here.
Member Decker.
Here.
Member Prescott.
Here.
And Member Wagner.
Here.
Thank you, governing body members, all present. We have a quorum and we may proceed.
Okay, thank you, Roger. So now we'll go to item 1, which is general public comment. This is for public comment for items that are not on the agenda. Silas, if you could please give instructions to virtual attendees, and if you're in person, have a comment, you can proceed to the podium.
For our virtual attendees, if you would like to make a public comment, please press the raise hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. If you are dialed into our phone-only line, pressing #2 on your telephone keypad will indicate that you would like to make a comment. At this time, there are no hands up in the comment queue.
Okay, thank you. And there's no comments here in the room. Next we have the decision on the minutes. These are 2 sets of minutes, February 6th, 2024 governing body general session meeting, and then the March 7th governing body general session meeting.
Thank you, Chair Campbell. If I can have a motion to approve the February 6th, 2024 and March 7th, 2024 WEIM governing body general session minutes.
So moved.
And I'll second.
Second. All in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The motion passes.
Okay, thank you, Roger. Now, before I hand things over to ISO CEO Elliot Mainzer, I wanted to highlight some of the really valuable analytical work and insights that have recently been generated by the organizations and people that support the Western EIM market's development and success. Last month, the Department of Market Monitoring produced its report on market issues and performance for the 3rd quarter of 2023. The title sounds routine, but it is not. It's a very insightful report, includes a lot of analysis on the Western EIM market during that quarter, and there's a particular focus on transfers in this particular edition. And then earlier this month, the DMM released its demand response issues and performance report for 2023. This is the latest of a series of annual reports. And at yesterday's Regional Issues Forum, which you'll be hearing more about later, we heard from a number of EIM stakeholders outside of California who are looking at bringing demand response into the markets. And I think the DMM's careful analysis of this topic is really going to help make that transition a success. Also, this month, we saw the ISO's Market Performance and Advanced Analytics team release its winter conditions report, analyzing the markets during the extreme cold weather in January. And finally, on today's agenda, we'll hear a briefing on fast start pricing from Susan Pope, the Western EIM's market expert. She's bringing in her expertise in wholesale markets throughout the U.S. So I highlight these reports, partly to just bring attention to them. They're each great, very worthwhile reads in their own, but also because they reflect the transparency and scrutiny that is essential to maintaining trust and building a successful Western energy market. Certainly, they're very helpful to me as a decision maker when it comes to policy matters. So thanks to everyone who's been involved with creating this important work and continues to be looking at the markets very closely. So now I'll turn things over to ISO CEO Elliot Mainzer.
Thank you, Chair Campbell and Vice Chair Konzioka and governing body members. Great to see all of you on this absolutely gorgeous spring day here in Folsom. Nice to see some cherry blossoms and some sunshine. I know it just puts a little wind in all of our sails. So just wanted to highlight a number of items from my CEO report. But before I start, obviously, this is the time of year where we start turning our attention to summer. Always very focused on summer readiness. I think you all know how seriously we take resource adequacy here at the California ISO. Very encouraged, of course, to see the nice snowpack in California. And of course, we've now exceeded over 8,000 megawatts of 4-hour lithium-ion batteries, which we know will always position us well for the summer. But it's always ever diligent, ever attentive, working closely here in the state and with our partners across the West to get ready for summer. So always job number one on reliability. Of course, we're just now, as you mentioned, turning the chapter, had, I think, a very robust set of discussions about winter conditions. As you mentioned, Chair Campbell, back on March 6th, our Market Performance and Advanced Analytics Group did release their winter conditions report with special emphasis on the cold snap that hit the Northwest and the Intermountain states over the Martin Luther King Jr. holiday weekend. Back on March 11th, we had another public meeting to discuss those findings. And I think it was a good opportunity just to reemphasize the reliability value of the energy imbalance market in economically dispatching generation to support regions that were experiencing stress grid conditions, as well as providing access to assistance energy transfers to entities who are unable to meet their short-term sufficiency requirements. Also an opportunity to clarify how the congestion management mechanisms work in our market and opportunities for additional coordination and co-optimization with transmission providers through expansion of our day-ahead market. So we're going to be posting a fact sheet with key statistics and takeaways from the report and subsequent discussions on our website in the near future. But happy to really appreciate the opportunity to have a very set of robust discussions about that issue. Turning to the extended day-ahead market, this is, again, very excited. Lots of really good progress to report. Of course, last month, we were very pleased to see that the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power Board voted to authorize LADWP to begin preparations to join the extended day-ahead market. LADWP has really emerged as just a wonderful partner for us. It's an entity that will bring more than 3,600 miles of transmission and a very diverse portfolio of power resources to the market, significantly broadening its breadth and depth. So very excited to have LADWP head in our direction. Back on February 16th, of course, we submitted a compliance filing for EDM and our day-ahead market enhancements initiatives. We're also working very actively with stakeholders on our FERC filing on a transmission revenue recovery mechanism, also known as the EDM access charge, and expect to have that filing completed here before the end of the month, if not sooner. We've also received good news earlier this month when FERC approved a number of our proposals that enable the ISO Balancing Authority to participate in EDM consistent with its approved design elements. Turning to transmission service and market scheduling priorities, wheel-throughs, we posted available transmission capacity numbers back in February for advanced reservations. We also ran our second request window in February for those seeking to establish wheeling through priority for June 2024 and beyond. And we're currently continuing manual implementation in March, publishing ATC numbers and opening up a request submission window until new functionality becomes available in April to automate the process. So thanks to all the teams working on that issue. It's obviously something that's very important. It's glue that holds us together in the summer, and we remain very committed to progress on the transmission scheduling priorities issues. Finally, just wanted to note, thanks to Joanne Serene and her team, we've got a date on the calendar for our 2024 Stakeholder Symposium. It'll be held on October 30th at the Safe Credit Union Convention Center in downtown Sacramento. With the welcome reception scheduled for the evening before. Really excited. I think this year's Stakeholder Symposium is going to be a fabulous event. We'll have a chance to explore current topics, including market expansion, transmission development, the CAISO's evolving model for stakeholder engagement, and chance to kind of take a glimpse into the future around new technology. So please save the date. Look forward to seeing all of you there. And I think registration details will be available soon. So I just wanted to extend one final round of appreciation to all of you and to everybody who really just an incredible community of people here in the CAISO and across the West, working so well together here these last few years in particular. Just excited about the positive energy and momentum around our day-ahead market and other initiatives. So thank you very much, Chair Campbell. Back to you.
Thank you, Elliot. Do you have any questions, comments from any of the governing body members? Okay, great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Now we'll move to agenda item 4, which is the Body of State Regulators update. We're joined by Haley Williamson, Chair of the Public Utilities Commission of Nevada and Chair of the Body of State Regulators. Chair Williamson.
Hi, good afternoon, Chair Campbell, Vice Chair Kanzioka, members of the Western EIM governing body. It's great to be with you here today, and thank you for letting me do that virtually. At the Bossers' first meetings this year, we received updates on the CAISO's ongoing working groups, the CAISO's plan to refile the transmission revenue recovery portion of the EDAM tariff, and CAISO's 2024 policy initiative catalog and roadmap process. Hearing from CAISO on their working groups and EDAM tariffs was extremely informative, and the Bosser will continue to monitor the working group and EDAM developments and provide feedback when it deems necessary. The Bosser also really appreciated the opportunity to participate in CAISO's policy initiative catalog and roadmap process. The Bosser did submit comments on that process that generally voiced support for the CAISO's ongoing policy initiatives and encouraged the CAISO to consider the interdependence of those initiatives in their sequencing. The Bosser's comments also voice support for the inclusion of the Regional Issues Forum Roundtable as part of the catalog and roadmap process. The Bosser sees value in the regional and multi-sector perspective that the RIF brings to the policy development process and really looks forward to participating in the remaining steps of this year's policy roadmap process. We have only had those few updates from the Bosser, so this is a short report to you all today, but thank you all for letting me be here. And with that short report, I'm happy to take any questions if anyone has any.
Thank you. Any questions from governing body members? Okay, thank you, Chair Williamson. And I wanted to applaud the Bosser for preparing the consensus comments on the ISO policy initiatives roadmap. Got to hear those comments yesterday when they were shared by California Commissioner Darcy Houck at the Regional Issues Forum meeting. They're very substantive. Definitely some look forward to spending more time looking at those priorities and how you're kind of thinking about the interlinkage between issues. I know it's hard to kind of round together something like that. So congrats on putting that together. And I look forward to seeing the Bosser in Denver in April.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Next, we're going to hear an update. This is agenda item 5 from the Regional Issues Forum. We are joined here in person by Meg McNall, who represents the 6 cities and is the new chair of the Regional Issues Forum.
Thank you, Chair Campbell, and good afternoon, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here today. I'm excited that this is my first update to the governing body, and it's coming on the heels of what I think was a very successful RIF meeting yesterday. We held our first inaugural roundtable to discuss the 2024 policy initiatives catalog and roadmap process. This was a carry forward of an item that had been included in the Governance Review Committee's final proposal, and the purpose of the roundtable is really to allow the sectors of the Regional Issues Forum to have a voice in the ISO's formation of the policy initiatives catalog and roadmap. And so each sector, we have 6, reported out on high priority items that sector hopes to see included in the catalog and advanced through to the roadmap. We recognize that not everything can advance as quickly as we all might like, but this was an important first step in airing what the sectors see as their priorities for enhancements to the EIM and EDAM markets. We were also extremely pleased to hear from California CPUC Commissioner Houck. As a representative of the body of state regulators, we appreciated her thoughtful remarks. We were also fortunate to hear from Member Decker as the governing body's liaison to the RIF, and we thank the governing body for its continued support of the roundtable project that all of the liaisons have been working hard on with the sectors. And finally, we also appreciate the support from the CAISO for the roundtable effort. Also at yesterday's meeting, we had a very robust discussion on a broad range of topics pertaining to energy storage. We had an excellent panel comprised of representatives from Portland General Electric, the CAISO, PG&E, and CISA, the California Energy Storage Alliance, talking about different issues relating to the integration of energy storage resources, the current state of play in terms of how those resources are functioning within the markets, and where some stakeholders are hoping to see storage-related topics evolve. And finally, as alluded to earlier, we've had some changes within the composition of the liaison group. I will be serving as the chair of the RIF over the next year, taking Josh Walter of Seattle City Lights place. Allie Mace of the Bonneville Power Administration has agreed to serve as the vice chair of the RIF, and Lindsay Schleckaway, who is an EIM entity sector representative and with NV Energy, will be serving as the secretary. We also have some turnover in the liaison group with Rahul Kalaskar of AES and Scott Olson of Avangrid, both assuming liaison roles for the IPP and marketing sector, and with Jonathan Rumble of Southern California Edison Company taking Matt LaCar's place as a representative for the CAISO PTOs. With that, I can report that, as discussed yesterday, we are planning to prepare a written report documenting the roundtable discussion that took place. We'll be presenting that to the EIM governing body when it's ready, hopefully in the coming weeks. And that, I think, concludes my remarks. I'm happy to answer any questions. And again, thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Meg. Any questions, comments from members? Member Decker.
So I want to express my appreciation for Josh. And as Josh was the chair and Meg was the vice chair, there was really an uptick in how the RIF functioned and the structure, and they really took on board the GRC recommendations. And yesterday was just an amazing day. So if you are a sector representative or are in a sector and you're on the phone or in the room, I would really, really encourage that if you're not engaged in the RIF, you're going to see a really new RIF really doing just an excellent job. And even the session on storage yesterday it really highlighted issues. It gave us some ideas of things that we're interested in and are going to be following up with as a result of the RIF highlighting these, similar to the gas initiative. So I think the RIF is beginning to function more and more and more like the vision that it had early on, and it's really coming to fruition. So I know, Meg, that you'll carry on Josh's good work because you guys work so well together, and I'm proud to have been the liaison during that time frame.
Thank you so much, Member Decker.
Member Kanzioka.
Yeah, Meg, I was going to make similar comments that Anita just made, so I won't repeat it, and I'll just leave it that one, congratulations on being elected chair, and then congratulations, thank you to the entire RIF for the excellent work that was done. I thought it was, as Anita said, an outstanding meeting. I thought the quality was terrific, and the presentation on battery storage was very informative. So thank you.
Thank you, Member Kanzioka.
Member Wagner.
I want to heap on my accolades for the meeting yesterday, and just to recognize that what I saw yesterday is what I think we originally envisioned in the transitional committee. And I know it's been iterations of the RIF, but you guys knocked it out of the park yesterday. That was like, wow, this is what we envisioned, and it came to fruition. So tremendous gratitude, and it certainly will be helpful on this side of the table now for me going forward. So thank you.
Member Prescott.
Thanks, Andy. Thanks, Meg. Congratulations, and Allie as well into that leadership role. Ditto what I just heard, but I was going to emphasize what Member Wagner just talked about, all the way from the transitional committee to see the RIF developed where it is today is amazing. Not forgetting that it went out on its own early on to figure out what it was, and it performed well, but it has grown into this role as the market has grown. So kudos.
Thank you.
I'll just add my kudos. The Regional Issues Forum session yesterday was really impressive, and you could see there was a tremendous amount of effort that went into both within sectors, individual sector participants, and then the leadership kind of bringing it all together for a very worthwhile forum. Thank you. All right, so now we're on to item 6, which is we're going to hear a briefing from the Western EIM governing body market expert, Susan Pope, who will be providing a briefing that was something we requested. It's kind of the spirit of a reason we have a market expert is to help the governing body members sort of get up to speed on issues, look at these issues in new ways that maybe stakeholders and others are not looking at the issues. So we requested that Susan take a look at fast start pricing because it's one of the issues of great interest within the price formation enhancements initiative. So now I will turn things over to Susan Pope, who is joining us virtually.
So thank you, Chair Campbell. And good afternoon to you, to Vice Chair Kanzioka, other members of the governing body, and to everyone joining by WebEx. I'm very happy to be here today to discuss fast start pricing with you, although I wish I could see cherry blossoms like you have. This presentation, next slide, please. Thank you. So this presentation provides information about fast start pricing to support ongoing discussion, as Chair Campbell said, in the Price Formation Enhancements Initiative. Today, I'm going to provide thoughts and comments on a set of topics at a fairly high level, with the understanding that there will be time to go into more detail on any topic at the time reserved for Q&A at the end of my comments. First, I'm going to first recap why fast start pricing is being considered for the WEIM and the differences between fast start pricing, the flexible ramping product, and shortage pricing. Then, as indicated by the third and fourth topics, I'm going to turn to discussion of what can be learned from other ISOs' experience with fast start pricing and what might be involved for the WEIM to use an existing fast start pricing design. Finally, I'll provide a few thoughts about the California ISO's analysis of the potential impact of fast start pricing, and then wrap up by summarizing the possible impacts on the WEIM from a conceptual perspective. Next slide, please. Oh, actually, go back just one. I had one more point I wanted to make on the previous slide. So here, I just wanted to point out that I have not included a discussion of the design alternatives for fast start pricing that are currently being looked into by the California ISO in its stakeholder group. And this is because in my view, the design choices need to be tailored to the resource base of a region, its software design, and the timing of its market steps and of its bidding deadlines. So the CAISO is in the process of addressing these issues and how the fast start pricing design choices would be made for the WEIM if you choose to move forward. So I don't have that on my list of topics because I think it's premature to talk about it at this point. But that being said, I'll just pause quickly to see if anyone has comments on this list of topics, if there's anything in particular that I've left out that folks might really want to hear discussed.
Seeing no comments.
Thank you. So now the next slide, thank you. So this page provides an overview of the main points of this presentation. I'm going to go through these quickly since I'm going to come back to each one of them later. Just moving right along. The first takeaway is that the primary objective, not the only objective, but the primary objective of fast start pricing is to provide a more efficient price signal when fast start units are dispatched to meet load. And the related second point is that the fast start pricing, the more accurate fast start pricing signal cannot always and will not always be provided by either the flexible ramping product or shortage pricing. The reason for this is that these three pricing enhancements differ in terms of when they kick in and affect prices, in how they affect prices, and this is all fundamentally driven by the fact that they are attempting to reach different objectives and solve different issues in how they are modifying the prices. So the third takeaway is that the experience with fast start pricing in other ISOs should be very useful to the California ISO as it examines fast start pricing alternatives. But that being said, it's not clear to me at this time whether an existing fast start pricing design could be easily added to the WEIM in real time or in the EDAM. The fourth takeaway is that I think the CAISO's analytical work to this point that it's been presenting in the stakeholder groups has been very helpful for understanding fast start pricing, for understanding some of the design choices that are made in fast start pricing implementations, and the potential impact on prices and settlements of the different design choices. At a high level, the CAISO results look reasonable to me in comparison with results I've seen in other regions. But I will note that we're awaiting the first results that include the entire EIM and not just the CAISO. An additional point that I'll make at this point is that the CAISO's modeling indicates that an earlier study may have substantially overstated potential price impact of fast start pricing. In its analyses that it's been presenting in the stakeholder groups, the CAISO has had access to non-public data that the earlier study funded by PowerX and the Public Power Council did not have. And as a result of having this data, has been able to narrow the circumstances under which fast start pricing goes into effect, which naturally reduces its impact on prices. I'll also note that the CAISO's model choices, for example, with respect to the definition of fast start units, in other words, for example, what their maximum startup time can be, much more closely matches the design choices in other ISOs, and in my opinion, are more likely representative of the design choices that might be elected if the stakeholders and the WEIM and the CAISO agree to move forward on fast start pricing. I have two takeaways about the impact of fast start pricing in the WEIM from a conceptual perspective. The first is that with fast start pricing, there would be obviously higher LMPs when these units are started and needed to meet incremental load. And those higher prices could be for the EIM as a whole, or they might be for load behind specific constraints. So that's something that the CAISO has not yet looked at is the potential impacts of fast start pricing on load pockets or in specific regions. The change in the LMPs is going to reduce bid cost recovery payments. But again, I think the CAISO has offered some interesting thoughts on that in its analysis, where it has showed that a lot of the bid cost recovery payments in the CAISO at least are coming from the RUC. So those are the type of bid cost recovery payments that actually might not be reduced so much by fast start pricing. So we'll have to see where the CAISO goes with this and what it comes up with as it continues its analysis. The other point here, as you probably know, is that fast start pricing can also increase make-whole payments to any bids and offers that might come in at a price that is less than the settlement price for supply, but that are constrained down and told not to operate in the dispatch. So I'm moving now to the last bullet on this page, where the other takeaway about impacts, I'm going to take just a minute to explain. It'll take a few steps. One of the goals of increasing the efficiency of pricing with this methodology is to provide an incentive for changes in the bids and offers made into the dispatch because of the possibility that the higher prices coming out of fast start pricing could enable some efficiency gains from an increase in the set of bids and offers that the dispatch sees. So the intent is for the higher price signal to elicit offers that may not currently be made, such as incremental offers from imports, and also to possibly incentivize improved performance by scheduled suppliers. Also, the higher price signal could induce additional bids for price responsive load of the type that Chairman Campbell just talked about. The result of these changes in offers, as stated at the bottom of this page, is a possibility of reduced costs and emissions because the additional bids and offers could enable the dispatch at times to avoid starting a fast start unit and then running it for its entire minimum runtime. Sort of in short, or to try to put it more succinctly, the intent is for incremental bids and offers at times to be able to supplant the need to start up and run an additional thermal unit. Next slide, please. So now looping back to the first topic, which is what is the problem we're trying to solve with fast start pricing? Again, the objective is to fix price anomalies that can occur when the least cost dispatch starts up block-loaded fast start units. So this example should quickly show how that pricing anomaly can occur. In the example, the least cost dispatch to meet 250 megawatts of load is to start the fast start unit and block load it at 75 megawatts as shown in green, and then to dispatch an additional 175 megawatts from unit 1 as shown in blue. The 175 megawatts is less than the full output of the flexible unit 1. So the LMP in this example is going to be $25 because this is the cost of meeting an increment of load in this dispatch. Because unit 1 is dispatchable and flexible, it can respond to meet load at $25, even though the least cost dispatch started up this $50 per megawatt fast start unit. So what's going on here is that the scheduling step, in fact, sees that the incremental cost of meeting load is $50. But because of the block scheduling, the block loading of this fast start unit, in the pricing run, the LMP is going to turn out to be $25. So this is an example showing that without fast start pricing, the price may not reflect the actual cost in the scheduling run of meeting incremental load. So moving on to the bullets at the bottom of this page, there are two types of consequences of this pricing anomaly. The first is that it affects the settlement price paid for supply and load that have already been scheduled. And this can have material consequences for market participants, such as imports that are scheduled hour ahead or in RTPD, perhaps based on offers. For example, a block-loaded import might be scheduled hour ahead based on its offer, so it's in merit for scheduling. It looks like it's part of the least cost dispatch. But then it might find that when it comes to the 15-minute market, where the prices are determined for its settlements, the price might actually end up being different, end up being less than its offer. As shown in this picture, for example, if the import had offered at $35 and been scheduled, price could conceivably end up being $25 here. So with respect to the last bullet, the second consequence of the pricing anomaly is that understating the price of incremental energy sends the wrong price signal to incremental load and incremental supply bidding into the next dispatch, in the dispatch after that. So here I'm no longer talking about the impact of the understated price on the settlement of existing schedules. I'm talking about the signal that it sends to other parties to participate in the market. For example, the understated price could incorrectly encourage parties to schedule additional exports, even though the price for meeting the export schedule in the dispatch could turn out to be higher than the understated price they actually end up paying. The flip side of this is that the price signal for incremental supply is also understated, which sends the wrong signal to encourage incremental supply to offer into the dispatch. So an example here is that a higher price might encourage additional imports to offer or schedule in the 15-minute market rather than seeking a bilateral contract or sale. A final point is the day-ahead schedules will see a low price signal for deviations from their schedule. And this can basically undervalue the cost of their schedule deviations. So for example, an import that fails to deliver on its day-ahead schedule could end up paying a price when this fast start unit is on margin that is less than the cost of replacing its power. So next slide, please. Actually, before going on here, I'm going to stop and ask if there are any questions.
No questions.
Thank you, Andy. So this slide addresses why the flexible ramping product and shortage pricing do not fix the fast start pricing anomaly. I've included this slide because I've been asked many times whether the flexible ramping product could proxy for the pricing changes that need to be made to address fast start pricing. What the figure shows is that the three pricing designs come into effect in different but overlapping grid conditions. So in particular, the grid conditions when fast start units are dispatched and are needed to serve load overlap at times with the conditions when the flexible ramping constraint might bind, and they overlap with the grid conditions under which there might be capacity shortage. But fast start units might be dispatched to meet load also in situations in which there's neither a flexible ramping constraint nor a capacity shortage. So for this reason, neither of these products can be relied on to fix the fast start pricing anomaly. A further point just indicated here is that even when the flexible ramping constraint binds, the flexible ramping price could be above or below that would be set by fast start pricing. Similarly, price set by shortage pricing could be above or below that price that we might want for fast start pricing to set a more efficient, to send a more efficient price signal. So next slide, please. So the underlying reason why the flexible ramping product in shortage pricing will not fix the fast start pricing anomaly is at root because the three pricing enhancements are aimed at fixing different things. They have different objectives. So I'm not going to go through the information on this page. It's here mostly for your information and, to try to clear up some of the discussion that's been going on about the relationship between these different pricing enhancements. I'll also note that I have stated the objective of fast start pricing on this page differently than on previous pages, but all the statements are correct. They're just stated a little bit differently for different purposes. Next slide, please. So other regions have been using fast start pricing for quite a while. The New York ISO has had it in place since 1999, the Mid-Continent ISO since 2010, and the 6 ISOs that use it have accumulated quite a bit of experience that can be, and I think has been, useful to the CAISO in evaluating the potential impact of fast start pricing. And it will be useful as well in designing the details of the implementation if the WEIM and the CAISO decide to move forward with this price enhancement. So other ISOs have refined fast start pricing designs in 2 primary ways. The first is that they have refined the definition of the resources eligible to set prices under fast start pricing. So they've shortened, in large part, the startup times and the minimum runtime cutoffs of the units that are defined as fast start and eligible to set price. And they have excluded offline fast start resources from being eligible to set prices under fast start pricing. So this is one case in which there was kind of a failed experiment that the CAISO can learn from. I'll note here that one thing that I didn't think of it actually at the time that I was writing these slides is that another important element of defining what resources are eligible to set prices that I know in particular has been refined in the NISO is that they do not allow units to be eligible to set price that are simply running to satisfy their minimum runtime. So in some cases, in areas like New York, where a lot of fast start units might be needed as load ramps up, one after another fast start unit might be started. And I'm sorry, that is my puppy. We'll just have to ignore her. One after another fast start units might be started. And then as load falls, they still have to satisfy their minimum runtime. So when this happens, if the fast start units are no longer required to meet load, they are not eligible to set price and instead are block loaded, which has the result of letting price fall, which is what should be happening as load declines. Excuse me for just a minute. So moving on here, the other set of changes that ISOs have made is to refine the pricing paths used to calculate prices with fast start pricing. So the changes made here get a little more technical. They have changed how ramp constraints are modeled in the pricing paths, the methodology for inclusion of startup costs or not, when prices are determined. This is something that the CAISO has started to talk to stakeholders about. I think that's all I'm going to say about refinements to the pricing paths. So the last point, as I mentioned earlier, is that I think the fast start pricing design needs to fit with the region's resource mix and dispatch treatment of fast start resources. So although all this other experience exists coming from other ISOs with fast start pricing, even if their designs can at a high level be used in the WEIM, some tailoring will be necessary for the CAISO. For the WEIM. Next slide, please. So while the fast start pricing designs in other regions are very helpful, I don't know, and I don't think we can know without more information from the CAISO. But it is not, I am so sorry. I did do a trial of the puppy strategy.
I'll just say Susan, we're not really hearing the puppy on this end, but I gather it's distracting at your end.
Very glad you're not hearing her. She's scratching at her crate to try to get to her treat. Thank you for telling me that. So on the one hand, what we know is that both MISO and SPP have a flexible ramping product as well as fast start pricing. So we know that both FRP and fast start pricing can be implemented together, which was a concern expressed by the CAISO in a presentation back in about March of 2023. So in addition to this, I don't see any major problems right now in largely using the designs in other regions. However, I'm very conscious also that we don't know the details of the scheduling and pricing models that are used for the WEIM's dispatch. So I think we just need to wait for the CAISO to provide us with more information on this point. Even if fast start pricing design in other regions can largely be used for the WEIM, it's clear that other changes will be needed to implement fast start pricing, such as redesign of the pricing model runs. As discussed by the Market Surveillance Committee, there steps will need to be taken to prevent unintended pricing outcomes related to interactions with the FRP and ancillary services schedules. And modifications will clearly need to be made to the settlement system and bid cost recovery payment calculations. So any questions at this point?
Nope, please proceed.
Thank you. Next slide, please. So on this slide, I just give you quotes from a couple of or several independent market monitors to indicate the different views on fast start pricing. I think it's fair to say that the views of the independent market monitors are divided. In fact, they kind of fall into two different camps, for and largely against. I'm going to not going to linger on this slide, but I'm happy to come back and discuss the views of the market monitors more during the question and answer time. Next slide, please. So the CAISO has done some preliminary analysis of the possible impact of fast start pricing. And I think the analyses for those are for the CAISO, and I think the results for the full WEIM are supposed to be available soon. The CAISO results, as I said, seem to me to be reasonable in the sense that the impact of fast start pricing moves as expected as the design assumptions are changed. And the price impacts seem to be very similar to what I've seen in other regions. They're material, but relatively low, and they clearly are higher as expected during high load periods. At the bottom of this slide, I've listed some things I think it would be helpful for the CAISO to look at as it continues its analysis of fast start pricing. I think the first, third, and fifth bullets here are the most important in my mind. You can scratch, I think, the second bullet. The first is that it would be very helpful if the CAISO were able to model the impacts based on a fast start unit being defined as having no more than a 30-minute startup time and no more than a 1-hour minimum runtime. That is kind of the definition that a number of ISOs have landed on after years of experience with fast start pricing and analyzing the results of their fast start pricing systems. Secondly, the third bullet, I'd be very interested in the extent to which the fast start pricing impact might be expected to continue across multiple 15-minute market intervals, because this would enable efficiency gains from responsive changes to bids and offers. As I mentioned earlier, I think one of the possible benefits of fast start pricing is to enable others who are not required to bid or offer into the market to see the price signal, the higher price signal, and choose to participate. And by their participation, offer the opportunity to displace the startup of more costly or more emitting units. The final point, the fifth point on this page, is I'd be interested if the CAISO could give some thought to the extent to which fast start units are dispatched due to local constraints and whether this has any implications for understanding the results of their analyses. As I understand it, the work that's been done to this point has been treating the CAISO as a single dispatch region. So there have been no transmission constraints modeled. So the impacts that are being estimated assumes that the price impact affects all load and supply in the CAISO. But that might not be the case. So I think that's an interesting point for stakeholders, not just me, is the extent to which fast start pricing might be more have more local effects. The next slide, please. So in summary, fast start pricing at a conceptual level would impact the WEIM because there would be higher LMPs when fast start resources are used to meet incremental load. That might be for the EIM as a whole or in a constrained region. Now, these higher prices are going to compensate existing schedules at a price closer to the actual value of the power they're providing as seen in the scheduling run. So this is a point we talked about before. Furthermore, the higher prices could lead to additional bids and offers that would enable additional efficient real-time imports, perhaps less exports, and possibly more price-responsive load. And as I said, this offers the potential for a more efficient dispatch. There's also the potential for improved performance for resources that have been scheduled day ahead. As I mentioned, they'll see a higher settlement price if they're off schedule and have to buy back any of the energy that they scheduled day ahead, but didn't actually supply. So the final point on this page is that something we've also already talked about is that there would be changes to bid cost recovery payments, primarily decreases, but also increases. And also, just want to raise the point again that the reduction in bid cost recovery payments, needs to take a look at how much that potential reduction is affected by the fact that a lot of the units receiving BCR have been started for in RUC. So that's all I have for you today. And I'm happy to take any questions or to discuss anything in the presentation in more detail.
Thank you so much, Susan. So we're going to move to Q&A now, and there will also be opportunity for public comment, which we'll get to in a little bit. We'll start with Q&A with the governing body members. I'll go down the dais, and Vice Chair Kanzioka.
Susan, good afternoon, and thank
Hello.
you for this presentation on fast start pricing. I think you are correct in that it is a subject of great interest and much debate, and I think we could all use a greater understanding of this and how it applies in the current West. And so let me start off. I have a few questions. And the first one is, when you start off on the objective that fast start pricing is there to provide more efficient price signals. And the first question I had for you was, when you mentioned the price signal, does it provide a good model for incenting the building of more fast start units? And I ask that in the sense of, having a robust generation fleet of all different types of generation characteristics is very valuable. And so when you're writing these comments to us today, are you just referring to the operational price signal, or were you also thinking about the capital investment for the building of new fast start units, if that's what it took to have a more balanced generation fleet?
It's a really good question, Vice Chair Kanzioka. I actually purposefully did not mention impacts on investment incentives, and purposefully confined my comments to talking about potential impacts on the efficiency of the short run dispatch, which could also be applied to, extrapolated to the EDAM. This is because the price impacts of fast start pricing averaged over a whole year are not huge, but they can be large in particular time periods. Also, I'm aware that investment in the WEIM is largely not market-based for the most part. It's being driven by statewide objectives and programs that seek investments of certain kinds. So I think that I would expect fast start pricing to be an additional source of revenue, and potentially something that could be designed into an incentive type contract for a fast start unit, where maybe the fast start unit could keep a portion of the revenue that exceeds a certain amount. If it's online more than a certain number of hours a year or something like that. But I don't see this as potentially being enough revenue, to my knowledge, to be a primary driver of investment decisions. I have not heard of it spoken of that way in other regions.
Okay, thank you. I'm going to move on. Isn't on, I think it was slides 13 and 14, when you were addressing the combination of fast start pricing, flexible ramping product, and shortage pricing. And then you showed, you know, that there are 3 different regions and then the overlap. And the question I have is, as you're addressing this, are you noting or suggesting that if you have fast start pricing, it's done in conjunction with the other 2 elements and not
Yeah.
separate?
Oh, no, this is what this is meant to say, to be speaking to, is the grid conditions under which these 3 separate pricing mechanisms would go into effect. So I see them as completely distinct pricing mechanisms, separately designed and implemented to achieve different objectives. In other words, to tune up the prices in different ways, to be more efficient. But there are situations on the grid where more than one of these pricing mechanisms could be triggered at the same time. And that's what this shows. It shows that there are conditions under which the grid could be constrained for ramp, and also fast start units might be started up. Or there could be a capacity shortage and fast start pricing units could be started up. So conceivably, both of these things could be going on at the same time. They wouldn't be combined, the methodologies wouldn't be combined, but they need to recognize one another and make sure there's no double counting in payments and things like that. But they wouldn't be designed as a unit, if that's what you're asking.
No, I think you answered the question is that there would be separate products, but the product, let's say that fast start pricing, wouldn't meet all the needs of the flexible ramping constraint product. And same thing that if you had a fast start pricing, it wouldn't meet all the needs of the capacity shortage.
That's right. There might be a capacity shortage. Well, that's probably not the best example, because a lot of times when there's a capacity shortage, your fast start units are going to be dispatched. The thing is, they might not be marginal to meet load, so fast start pricing may actually not kick in. It's not going to be price setting. Something higher priced is probably going to be price setting when there's a capacity shortage. But you could certainly have a situation where a flexible ramping constraint binds, and there's a price for flexible ramp at the same time that fast start units are dispatched. But the price paid for ramping at that time may be higher, will probably be lower than what you'd want to pay on margin because the fast start units were dispatched.
Okay, thank you. I have one last question. I want to make certain there's time for the other governing body members to ask questions, and also for public comment. So my last question is, as you're looking at fast start pricing and the other elements that go along in this scenario, how do you see from your perspective only, the perspective on, let's say, fast start pricing versus pricing scarcity? Do you see, say, one having a higher priority? Everything can't be done at once, and allocation needs to be made on how to implement these different elements. Where do you see fast start pricing falling into this realm?
That's really hard to answer, Rob, without knowing how difficult it would be and costly it would be to implement the different alternatives. So, I think fast start pricing, is I think important from the perspective of getting the right price to supply and load that isn't obligated to bid in to the EDAM or to the real-time market. I think it's really important from that perspective. Ranking against shortage pricing, I think shortage pricing is extremely important. And there's some elements. Shortage pricing is kind of a blanket word, I think, used for a number of different potential improvements to pricing that the CAISO has been discussing. That's the way it's been discussed in the stakeholder group. So shortage pricing is kind of an umbrella term under which, for example, you might have operating reserve shortage pricing. You might have changes to the conditions under which the bid cap would go from $1,000 to $2,000. Well, those two things are very different in terms of the potential difficulty of implementing them, right? Changing the operating reserve demand curves and doing co-optimization of ancillary services or operating reserves and energy in real time, that's a really big lift. I think without the benefit of working for the CAISO, it seems like a bigger lift to me than changing the circumstances under which the bid cap might change. So there are two different types of changes to shortage pricing that could have very different costs in terms of their ability to implement. So I would say changing the bid cap, I think that's, if you can do that easily, that would be really good to do. Fast start pricing versus, changes to the operating reserve demand curves and co-optimization of ancillary services in real time. That real-time co-optimization could be really difficult, and you might want to push ahead with fast start pricing in advance of that if it's not too difficult. So I'm trying to sort of feel my way around to answer to your question. I hope that helps.
Susan, it does, and I appreciate your response. And so thank you very much. And then Chair Campbell.
Member Decker.
Hi, Susan. Great report, by the way. If you can go to slide 9. So I'm always interested what others are doing and what's working and what's not working. And I'm looking at slide 9. So one more. Oh, I don't know what slide it is on.
Oh, slide 9 it would be around.
It's the ISO comparisons.
With the colored boxes.
Yeah. Sorry. In our board book, it's a different number. One more, 2 more. Right there. Whoa. Okay. So, well, a couple observations. One is I see that Potomac made that works in both circumstances. So I'm wondering, is there something that Potomac sees and how they were implemented? And so fundamentally, as you looked at the 4 entities, was there something different in how fast start pricing was implemented that made it seem good in MISO, good in NISO, not so much in PJM, and not so much in ISO? So I'm curious as to what was common that made it good and what was maybe not uncommon that made it not work as well.
I think that the difference in opinions of the IMMs, I don't think it stems from differences in how fast start pricing was implemented, or whether it's working well in one region versus another. And I stand to be corrected by the DMM on this. I see the objections of the CAISO DMM and the PJM IMM, who are the independent market monitors who do not view fast start pricing favorably, as being driven by more theoretical concerns about what the correct way is for prices to be determined in markets. So if you go back, for example, and look at the CAISO DMM's comments in 2017 that it made to FERC when FERC originally ordered fast start pricing to be implemented in all the ISOs, the CAISO DMM talks a lot about, quotes a lot from economists and established theory about what the correct way is to determine price. They quote from Coase and Hotelling and some, sort of landmark economic theory. So I think that I would say that their objection is that, marginal means marginal. And the marginal cost of serving an incremental load in the example that I showed you is $25, and that should be the price. So there's a real, that's the kind of the crux of the difference. It's not the implementation. It's, I think the alternative view is that what is marginal, really, you have to take into account the lumpiness of the block loading of these units. And the fact that the market operates and considers these blocky commitment dispatch decisions as part of the dispatch. The dispatch isn't just looking, as in theory, at perfectly linear, smoothly increasing bids and offer curves. It's looking at lumpy bids and offer curves. And so the alternative view is that, you have to take into account what the actual software is looking at when it makes the decision about how to serve load in a particular interval. And if it is evaluating, do I turn on this fast start unit, or do I schedule imports that might be mid-incrementally, or price responsive load that might be bid incrementally? And if it chooses the fast start unit rather than these other things that are bid incrementally, the fast start unit essentially becomes the incremental decision and should be price setting on margin. So I don't think, Anita, it comes down to anything more than a very, a real difference in views about what is sort of theoretically correct. Or, maybe Potomac economics and other economists view the theory as perhaps not applying in this case.
Thank you. That was very helpful. So thank you.
Welcome.
Member Prescott.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate this. I always appreciate your insight on these topics. So, and we got a lot more work to do on this one, obviously. But my question is, it's a follow-on to what Rob was talking about. And it goes back to your Venn diagram that you have kind of the three different options. You talk about fast start pricing, the flexible ramp product, and shortage pricing. And I guess maybe to just ask maybe a yes or no question, if it was a well-designed market with these products, are they mutually exclusive within a market?
You mean, would only one of them go into effect at a time?
Just the opposite. In other words, could you have a market that used all three of these tools successfully?
Yes, absolutely. I think, for example, the Midwest ISO does that. So it has shortage pricing. It has, many of the elements of shortage, all the different elements of shortage pricing that have been discussed under the umbrella of that term within the CISO. It has a flexible ramping product, and it has fast start pricing.
And I guess the key in my question was well-designed. I guess you'd have to design them so they work together.
That's
Anyway,
right.
thank you.
That's right.
Thank you.
So I'm going to hold my questions for now. Maybe go to public comment. If you're in the room, you can work your way up to the podium. And Silas, if you could please provide the directions to people who are on remotely.
If you would like to make a public comment, you can press the raise hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen. Or if you are dialed in through the phone only line, you can press #2 on your phone's keypad to enter the comment queue. At this time, we have no hands up in the virtual queue.
Okay, in the room here, we do have a comment from Mark Rothleader.
Yeah, thank you. And first off, I really do appreciate Dr. Pope's review and explanation, and I largely agree with the observations. One thing I do want to clarify, and it's back on the example slide, and I know it's subtle, but I do have to correct that. Could we go back? I think it might be slide 12 or 13. Yeah, this slide, 12, sorry. Yeah, so it's not widely used, it's very narrowly used, but we do have a form of fast start pricing today. It's called constrained output generator pricing. And the example that Dr. Pope has here actually is the constrained output generator. It's an offer on resource. And even today, that is eligible to set the price. So if this was the example that actually played out today, we would actually set the price at $50. The example that is relevant that we don't do is if it's a resource that has a minimum load or block loaded capability, and it has dispatch capability above and beyond that minimum load block. That's a resource that we don't allow to set the price on its minimum load dispatch. So I would modify the example to clarify that. And I point this out in part to, one, indicate that we do have a form of it, and probably the technological lift to get to a broader set is probably not a huge lift. It's a philosophical question that needs to be addressed. And I think Dr. Pope has appropriately highlighted those philosophical questions. The other thing I want to clarify is, and it may be the difference, I think, to one of the questions, how is things different between us and other ISOs? And one difference that does make a difference is we do have a multi-interval dispatch, at least in real time.
Right.
And that has implications about pricing as well as the fast start pricing and flexible ramping. And I don't want to say that it creates an impossibility to implement fast start pricing, but it is one of the differences that needs to be carefully looked at when implementing a fast start pricing mechanism. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I had heard about this rule, but I obviously should have looked it up. I thank you for your comments. I agree with you that multi-interval dispatch can complicate the implementation of something like this, which is one of the reasons that I had said that the implementation needs to take into account the software and the timing of the steps of the software and the bid steps. Those clearly affect what is seen as marginal or incremental from the standpoint of the scheduling. So thank you.
I do have one follow-up question for
Go ahead,
Susan. And the question is, I think you got captured well the offsetting benefits potentially of the bid cost recovery. And you answered Rod's question about the investment. What about the resource adequacy contracting and the price that people would adjust potentially for setting up and making resource adequacy capacity arrangements? Would that be affected by fast start pricing and the price that resources would see through the market and the energy prices? Do you expect that to be a feedback to that as in the net market revenue?
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I left it out because was just trying to simplify, but as these RA contracts are written, my understanding is that what is looked at is what the sources of revenue are for the resource in the market through ancillary services, through energy, And to the extent that fast start pricing nudges up those prices in some intervals, that will change the revenue stream. Possibly there will be an offsetting change in the bid cost recovery amount, in which case there would be no net impact on the amount that would need to be recovered through an RA contract. But to the extent that the total amount of money earned through energy ancillary services and bid cost recovery were to increase because of this, I would expect there to be a feedback loop to the prices set in RA contracts.
Susan, I'm going to come back with a question that I had. So I think I picked up on the idea that the sort of the value of fast start pricing relates to the sort of generation mix that exists in a region. And I was that got me thinking about how the Western US generation mix has, been evolving with certain types of resources kind of going,
right,
being retired and others sort of coming in. But let me know if that's a correct characterization of whether the type of units in a region matters. But I was also just wondering what's if you could say more about the sorts of resources that make fast start pricing really important, and if there are any thoughts on whether we're going forward having more of those resources, or those resources being more important, or whether it's going the other direction, or if I'm just not thinking about that correctly. Thank you.
Yeah, I think where fast start pricing first came about in New York, it was because they had a whole fleet of gas turbines that they needed to dispatch at certain times to meet load or to manage contingencies. So they dispatched one after another of these gas turbines that then had to operate at their minimum load. And, when LMP was implemented, other suppliers came back and said, hey, the price is really, really low because these, fast start units are just running out their minimum runtime. And so it's pretty clear that when you've got, big fleet of fast start units that you might rely on in certain circumstances, that fast start pricing becomes more important. And my understanding is that, at least in the past, I don't know how far in the past, that wasn't something that was observed in California. I also have an understanding that the reliance on the fast start units might be different and might be heavier in some of the EIM regions, which makes this fast start pricing more important than it might just be if you were looking at California alone. Also, as you think about managing increasing intermittency in trying to sort of maximize the use of renewable resources by enhancing the scheduling practices and making all that stuff work as well as you can, the system operator is going to need fast start units and other things that it can start quickly, whether it's batteries or, maybe some price responsive load or something that it can rely on when something happens and it doesn't have a lot of thermal units online. You see this in other regions. There aren't as many thermal units that are operating and that have room to move up and down quickly in response to intermittency or contingencies. So, with fewer thermal units being online, I think you can expect that there might be more gas start units that need to be started up from time to time, and therefore perhaps more of a need for fast start pricing.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Pope. Member Prescott.
Yeah, just to follow on to Andy's question, Susan, with regard to hydro, how does that fit into there? Because you talk about kind of fast start pricing being simple cycle combustion turbines, but certainly out here we have a lot of hydro. Some of it's constrained in how much you can ramp up, but there's a fair amount that would be fast start. So how does that change the mix, or how does that look?
So, in my experience, hydro doesn't have a big startup time, startup cost, or minimum load in the same way that these gas turbines do. So hydro is typically not, hydro units are typically not going to be setting a different price with fast start pricing than they would without fast start pricing, simply because they don't have the characteristics of having a large, expensive minimum load block followed by perhaps a short incremental block. However, they would, if they're online and are, in merit or dispatched, at the same time that a fast start unit is, they're going to see higher prices when those fast start units are online to serve load, and fast start pricing can set a higher price than you might see today. So they can benefit from fast start pricing, but I don't think they're going to set fast start prices.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Susan, for your efforts kind of diving into this issue, your presentation today, and for helping the governing body as well as everyone else who's on the call kind of help get up to speed and hear some perspectives on the fast start pricing issue. Thank you very much.
Welcome. Thank you. Bye-bye all.
Okay, now we're going to go to agenda item 7, which is we're going to hear from Becky Robinson, Director of Market Policy Development at the ISO, providing a briefing on policy initiatives.
Good afternoon, Chair Campbell, Vice Chair Kanzioka, and members of the governing body. It's my pleasure to be with you here today to give you an update on our policy initiatives. Thank you. All right, so we wanted to start out today with talking about the Western Energy Imbalance Market Resource Sufficiency Evaluation Enhancements. And as we've been sort of telegraphing to you, we've been working on getting closer to some enhancements to our implementation of RSE Phase 2 work related to accurate identification of lower priority exports. That's an issue that as we've gotten closer to implementing those enhancements, we have gotten a considerable amount of feedback from market participants about our proposed implementation of that, how we propose to do that. And so that's an area where we've been working very closely with market participants to better align our approach for how we want to do this with tagging practices, with the overall goal of still providing guardrails that enable the ISO to better manage exports out of the CAISO BAA. And that's the main highlight that I wanted to flag on this item. We are still planning on kicking off an RSE Phase 3 effort later this year, which I think came up a little bit in the RIF roundtable yesterday, that some folks were interested in seeing that work get started and progress. So we will certainly be taking that into account and continue to start that later this year. Next slide, unless there's any questions on, I guess I'll pause for questions at the end of each slide. But
Becky, I have a question. I'm going to ask it here. It maybe pertains to other ones also, but something else we heard at the Regional Issues Forum. Well, this is among the initiatives. People were folks are very enthusiastic on having continue to be prioritized. But as more people would love to see, stakeholders would love to see more visibility on the timelines. And I know there's some information here, and there's information maybe certainly provided elsewhere. But I just wanted to echo that, both the timeline of the actual initiative, but also potential implementation date for things that are likely to go into implementation. Just that's information people are hungry for.
No, appreciate that. I appreciate you highlighting that. Yeah, happy to take that feedback and see what we can do to be more transparent in that area. Thank you. All right. Next up, we've got our extended day ahead market and day ahead market enhancements items, which since the last governing body meeting, we have several updates to report out on. First is great news that the LADWP Oversight Board voted in February to authorize beginning of preparations to join EDAM. So we were very excited to hear that and look forward to working with them on that. And then also we've got several updates related to FERC filings. On February 16th, last month, we did file that narrow compliance filing that FERC had requested on the EDAM and DAME order. That was really related to kind of putting some language into the tariff. Nothing, no real news there, just making sure some language is in the tariff. And then we are targeting another filing with FERC at the end of this month on the EDAM transmission revenue recovery design. And this was a piece that you'll recall in the December order on EDAM, FERC had rejected that narrow piece of the filing. So that's an area where we have been working with stakeholders and working internally to kind of beef up our clarification and justification for that program. Again, no real changes to the design there, but getting that in front of FERC with more clarification than we had before, which is aligned with, they rejected that piece without prejudice. So. All right. And then earlier this month, FERC approved our tariff revisions on the ISO BA authority to participate in EDAM. So that was great news as well. We were very happy to see that approval. And again, related to the TRR issue, FERC narrowly rejected a portion of that filing, which we are, which we'll need to follow up on. And then other than that, we are continuing to plan and prepare for the DAME implementation working groups later this year. With that, I'll pause for questions.
Becky, just one question from me. And with respect to LADWP, again, nothing official yet. So it is right now, tranche 1 is still Pacificor and Bank. And anybody else you don't know yet that might be tranche 1. I mean, in other words, you don't know LADWP since it's not official yet. You don't know that they're planned to be joining at the same time yet, or is there a?
That's a great question. I'm looking to the folks around the table. Mark might be.
Yeah, so I think we have not settled in on that answer yet. My expectation is that they will not be in tranche 1.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, very good. Thank you.
All right. Next up, we've got our transmission services and market scheduling priorities, otherwise affectionately known as wheel through. And the update here is just to let you know that we have continued our monthly process where we're manually calculating the available transmission capacity on the interties and opening up, again, monthly, we're opening up these request submission windows for folks to indicate and request that they'd like wheel through ATC for this summer and for the rest of the year. So we had our second of those windows in the end of February. We actually opened up the March window, I think, just today. But we did, for the February window, we did see a few more requests come through and we were able to grant those in full. Any questions there?
Member Decker.
Are you getting any feedback on, as it's being published, are you getting any feedback, aside from someone saying, this is what I want this capacity, are you getting actually feedback, good, bad, or indifferent, about the numbers that are being published and how it's being presented and people's access?
I have not heard any feedback in that space. I mean, I will share that we have decided to publish the actual, it's public, what we, the requests that we have granted. And of course, it's public, the ATC that we're saying is available. So what we've seen is there's, as of now, there's a maximum of a little less than 500 megawatts wheeling through in August is what we're seeing for the peak month. But I don't know if others may have, others around the table may hear any feedback on that, or if you have any feedback that you'd like to share.
I don't have any feedback that I'd like to share, but because it was something that there was a lot of requests for, there was a lot of energy around it with stakeholders. So you're doing it. So that's great. And I was just wondering if there was any kind of feedback coming back to say, this is what we expected. This is not what we expected. Thank you very much. I mean, anything.
I think they appreciate the timely availability of the inventory that we could offer. I think based on the largely amount of requests that we are able to respect and honor. I think there is appreciation that there is a sufficient amount of inventory. I think it's premature to know whether there is more going to be requested as we approach the summer that we may not be able to completely honor. So I think the ultimate determination of people's happiness is maybe still out there, and needs to be probably reserved until the summer approaches.
And Becky, I just wanted to comment, it's kind of similar to what Anita said. I have followed what has been publicly posted, and I want to thank staff on the amount of information that is available. And I think having it in the aggregated form is very helpful. It's really easy to see, you know, what has been made available, what has been secured. And it'll be interesting to track it over the next 3 months, Mark, as you stated, to see how much more is posted as ATC and then how much is requested. So, but I do think at least the information being posted is very helpful.
Just maybe a sidebar. So where it's posted under planning and reliability requirements, can it just be posted under ATC? To make it transparent?
We can take that back and try to make that easier.
Okay. Next item, we've got our rules of conduct enhancements. So those phase 1 reforms that you all that you know have already been through our process and we've filed at FERC. We did request that FERC order by this Friday. Because our filing was uncontested, we have had a little bit of back and forth with FERC staff. Our take from that is that there's that effort is on a good trajectory still. So we will be awaiting that FERC order and planning to implement shortly thereafter. And then as far as some of the reforms we did not undertake in phase 1, but which there was interest in pursuing, we are moving forward with those some additional phase 2 enhancements. So we've named this effort PEDRIT. Penalty enhancements, demand response, investigation, and tolling. So and we are acronyms allowed to have 2 syllables. We are planning to put out a straw proposal just next week. I believe the 28th is next week. And so in that straw proposal, we'll be exploring items related to what you see here, establishing some timelines and penalties around demand response data submission, streamlining our rules of conduct investigative process, updating our process for collecting and tolling penalties if entities are sort of simultaneously seeking relief at FERC, and discussing some other stakeholder concerns generally on this topic where we've gotten comments and feedback. So things like whether there should be a minimum materiality threshold, a waiver of the first offense, things like that, or whether we should have a sort of strict guidelines for penalties and just stick to those. Any questions on this item? All right, thank you. So price formation enhancements. So this working group has continued to hold sessions. Again, this is on scarcity pricing, BAA level market power mitigation, and fast start pricing. And as Susan indicated, scarcity pricing is a little bit of an umbrella term here rather than a precise term. So we've been exploring some issues related to pricing under tight system conditions and high price system conditions. And in particular, on March 12th, we held a working group to discuss an issue that you heard about yesterday at the RIF roundtable related to storage resources and other use limited resources such as hydro, some types of hydro resources who have limited amount of energy they can provide. And so they want to use it during the time of highest prices. We want to save it for times of greatest need on the system, and those incentives are aligned. So that's great. And so we discussed the issue of when we're in those FERC Order 831 conditions, where some resources are allowed to bid above the typical soft offer cap of $1,000. How should that affect resources like storage or hydro with pondage or cascading hydro, things like that? And we've gotten a lot of incoming feedback from stakeholders that they see this as a real priority issue. We are planning to, we are looking into what is possible, or what are the different options for how you might handle this, right? And then what does that look like from an implementation perspective, and what is the timing, potential timing around implementing those sorts of things. So this is an issue that, again, I think we got a lot of incoming on our policy catalog and roadmap process on this issue. The RIF, had a panel discussion on this and other related issues yesterday. But so this is one where I think we're going to be looking carefully to see, is there something we can do in the near-term timeframe to give assurance that these types of resources can be used in the most appropriate way, and can offer into the market, hopefully, in a way that enables the market to take them at those times of greatest need, as we get into summer, in particular, with our eye on that. So more to come on that issue. And then also in price formation enhancements land, I did want to flag that this Friday, my colleague Guillermo Bautista Alderete and his team will be presenting their analysis of fast start pricing in the broader Western energy imbalance market footprint. So it'll be a nice follow-on to Susan's presentation today, to Dr. Pope's presentation today. Sorry. Any questions on this item? All right. Greenhouse gas coordination. So we continue to hold these working group meetings. We held one last week in person here at the ISO. We had great attendance, both in person and on the phone. But the working group, continues to focus on, these are the kind of the three key topics that we've been telegraphing to you pretty consistently now for a while. But this last working group had some really interesting presentations from market participants and stakeholders about different methods for how you could use constraints in the market to track emissions and achieve compliance with some new state programs that we're seeing with non-priced GHG reduction programs, right? Where they have a requirement for GHG reduction, but they don't have a GHG price. So how do you affect that in the market? So one stakeholder presented some methods for using constraints in the market to do that. Another stakeholder presented methods for post-market reporting and accounting that would enable that same compliance, but without using a constraint in the market. So pros and cons of different approaches, and I think all with an aim of avoiding double counting of resources, enabling market participants to comply with these programs. And we had great engagement on that from stakeholders, and really appreciate that. And I'll also say we also had some stakeholders proposing streamlining of the problem statements that the group has articulated, and moving forward from those problem statements, sort of accepting those as, the working group has successfully articulated these, and now we can sort of move beyond that to the next step. So I think that was a great marker for the working group there. Any questions on this item? All right. Gas resource management. This is a working group that, again, the points here, for the most part, are, the topic areas that we've, again, been telegraphing to you on this working group, what they're focused on. But I wanted to highlight for this one that it feels like the working group and the ISO staff that have been working on it with them, feel like the working group has sort of run its course, if you will. And so the working group is planning to move to next steps and publish an action plan and issue paper soon with a list of recommendations from stakeholders on next steps to move into policy development. So again, that's a nice milestone to see coming out of these working groups. Yeah, any questions on this one?
Member Decker.
So, well, two things. One is, this is an area that the RIF did a presentation on and really moved this. And so if you look at September till now, it's like 8 months. That's kind of lightning speed in the electric industry to do anything in 8 months. So you guys should be applauded, and the stakeholders should be applauded on the work on this particular issue. So I'm really glad to see that it's really moved forward to a point where it's ready or close to ready for an action plan. Just a piece of feedback. Soon, like in the next month or two, the next 6 weeks is a lot better than soon, because soon is like next week. So just thinking about that, but really great work by the ISO and great work by the stakeholders on this issue.
Thank you for that feedback, Member Decker. I appreciate that. And yeah, we can try and provide more clarity next time. All right. And then finally, I think this is my last slide, our resource adequacy working group. We also had one of these last week, and again, in person. So that was great to see. And, you know, these, in large part, these are the, you know, the three big topic areas that we've been focusing on in the resource adequacy working group. I did just want to, you know, on that, the middle sub bullet where we are, you know, working on sort of thinking through the rules and our ISO tariff that relate to resource adequacy, obligations and so forth. I just want to note that the working group has been, you know, really kind of digging into potential reforms to resource counting, performance and availability incentives, and outage and substitution processes. And I know, you know, these sound like very detailed and sort of in the weeds pieces of our tariff, you know, obligations and so forth. But they really do have significant impact on incentives for how resources show up in the market, and, you know, ultimately contribute to a resource adequate system. So it's really, it's been nice to see the engagement there. And I would say on the resource adequacy working group as well, we are getting the sense that this effort might be, it might be ripe, say soon again, with apologies for not having more precise timing, but it feels like there's a lot of recognition of, yes, these are kind of the problem statements of what we see here and the areas and scope for what we want to work on in terms of policy development. So I wouldn't be surprised to see this effort, to see at least pieces of the resource adequacy working group move more into policy development again soon. But any questions here?
Before we go to public comment, but yes, Vice Chair Kanzioka.
Becky, not so much a question, but a comment that your presentation is clearly demonstrating, you know, this is a heavy lift by staff, by the participants, and trying to manage all these things, working in parallel, moving this forward. As Member Decker just commented, it's great to see that these things have moved forward. I mean, they're just not all being worked on, but there's progress being made. And I know there's a lot of pressure to bring things to fruition and hit those next steps. Just a lot of appreciation for making these things happen by everybody involved. So thank you.
Thank you for that feedback. I'm happy to take that back to the teams.
Yeah, now we're going to go to public comment. Silas, could you please provide instructions for public comment?
If you would like to make a public comment, you can press the raise hand icon at the bottom of your Zoom screen, or if you are dialed into our phone only line, you can press #2 on your telephone keypad to enter the comment queue. We have one hand up in the comment queue. Pam Sporberg, you have been sent a prompt to unmute yourself.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes.
I'm here to share some comments on the default energy bids for energy limited resources during critical energy hours. And just to raise, I think, a topic of conversation that's come up recently as a little bit of a challenge as we've seen more periods of energy price volatility in the market, and particularly to highlight some of the challenges with the default energy bid cap on hydro resources and storage resources during the January events, where those resources were capped at $1,000 a megawatt hour. And the challenge with that bid cap and being able to manage the deployment of an energy limited resource throughout the day. So in the energy imbalance market, the market look ahead has a 4.5 hour look ahead for unit commitment. And over the course of the WEIM, being able to use a bid strategy to really indicate when the energy from a use limited resource like hydro or a storage asset should be deployed has been a very effective tool at helping to manage those assets into the best hours for their deployment, particularly the peak hours or other critical operating hours. However, when prices are approaching the bid cap during more than just the peak hours, the $1,000 megawatt hour bid cap becomes very challenging to use to limit those assets deployment in the right hours of the day. And so we were seeing some periods in January where our hydro was getting run earlier in the day and creating some reliability challenges as we were approaching the evening peaks. And so I think we're just encouraging the CAISO and the governing body to think about solutions that look creatively at the bid cap on energy limited resources, especially as the caps or the bidding parameters for resources above $1,000 are particularly tied to the price of natural gas. And so if we can look at ways to indicate when the market itself or other indices are above that $1,000 megawatt hour or approaching the $1,000 cap, to have some flexibility in the bids for use limited resources like hydro or storage, to allow them to bid in such a way that helps shape their energy into the most capacity critical hours of the day, is something that we are encouraging the CAISO and the governing body and the board to consider as an upcoming enhancement.
Thank you, Pam. And Becky, just confirming, is this the same issue that you described when you were talking about the price formation enhancements initiative?
Yes.
Okay,
Thank
great.
you.
Thank you. Any other public comments?
No, there are no I
thank
apologize.
you.
One hand just went up. Scott Ransel, you have been sent a prompt to unmute yourself. Please go ahead.
Just in time. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I want to say thank you to the governing body and stakeholder community for the opportunity to provide comments on the CAISO's 2024 policy efforts. I'm Scott Ransel with Pacific Gas and Electric Company. Similar to the issue that Pam just raised, I want to call out that we appreciate the efforts that CAISO is undertaking from that March 12th working group to focus on resources that are currently limited to the $1,000 megawatt cap, and look for solutions that would help address the needs for those resources and accommodating requirements that exist in FERC Order 831. A significant majority of the stakeholders agree addressing this issue, and doing so urgently is an important step, especially before the summer, to ensure that we don't have operational risks or potential for early dispatch of storage resources during tight system conditions. The battery resource pool, as we all know, continues to develop, and it's important to ensure that batteries are an essential and competitive resource in the bid stack. With that, I will open for questions, and thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Scott. Any other public comments?
No, there are no further hands in the comment queue at this time.
Okay. Thank you very much, Becky.
Thank you.
Member Decker has a comment.
So I have a comment in follow up to both Pam's comments and Scott Renzel's. I really do think that there needs to be some elegant solution for non-generating resources that allows them to go over the big cap. And I think I'm hoping we're going to hear more about that sooner than later. So I'll use the soon word. I know, soon, like next week. No, I'm thinking like our next meeting, but I do think it is important to get ahead of it if there's a way to do it. And I know that the ISO staff is working on this already. So I would just want to encourage you to continue to do so.
Yeah, and this is Anna. I will step in just for a moment to respond. Yes, so duly encouraged. We have heard from the stakeholders yesterday at the RIF and also in our price formation enhancements working group efforts. And we are looking to see what can be done, what is the best solution. It is a question that, affects different resources, not just one particular group of resources. And from a price formation perspective, I want to highlight that one of the things we are trying to do with the working groups is when these things come up and they surface and they go, they bubble up to the surface, we skim those things and try to move at those things a little bit more quickly if needed. And I view this as a success, if you wish, of this working group effort on price formation. And so staff is looking into it very closely. We're talking about it actually quite a bit, a lot of emails going back and forth, and also input from the stakeholders. I really appreciate both Pam and Scott raising it today, so we have an opportunity to address that. But I do want to assure you, and hopefully by May's next meeting, we can at least provide you an update as to where things are at.
Thank you, Anna. Member Prescott.
Just a quick follow on, Anna. And I know you don't have a solution out there. You're looking at solutions, but do you think this is the sort of thing that would require our approval, board approval, and FERC, or do you have a feel for what the solution? I mean, when I heard it in RIF yesterday, I thought it looked like there might be an easy solution that was out there, but probably a lot more complex than I understand.
I suspect there will be a need for a tariff rule change. These rules are very closely tied to the prescriptions that FERC imposed in the FERC Order 831, where they said that the increase above the $1,000 bidding cap has to be tied to a cost verification. And that's why we see some of the stickiness in the current rules. And so what we'll have to do is come up with just and reasonable reasons to increase for these resources, the use limited resources. I refer to them as use limited resources, but they are resources that look at their bidding for the day based on the opportunity costs of their assets, not based on solely the price of fuel during those hours. And so those are they're different than the gas resources. Pam pointed out that at least we have a mechanism when we have a large number of requests to increase the bid cap above 1,000 by resources that are under fuel regions or that use the gas indices for purposes of bidding in, that we just trigger an increase for the gas resources. That does not apply to the non-gas resources, which puts them out of merit order, if you wish, on the bid stack. They become sort of their lower bids means they get dispatched first. And so we are looking at that very closely, but I suspect we'll have to go to FERC at least, which means we'll have to come back to you as well for a tariff change and a board decision and governing body decision, given that it does affect also the WEIM. So yes,
Okay.
Long answer to a yes.
Okay, well, thank you. Would, anything we can do to expedite? I'm not suggesting we bypass the public process because we need to hear all perspectives on it. But as both Scott and Pam pointed out, for this to be out there this summer would be pretty important to have it corrected.
Yeah, we are certainly doing the best we can. I will note there may be some technology complications around that as well. So the timing on which a solution may be feasible is something we need to determine based on what we come up with. So,
okay. Thank you, Anna.
Okay, thank you. Now I'll move to our final agenda, item 6. Do governing body members have any future agenda items to add?
It would just.
Yes, we've just been discussing a future agenda item. Anything else? Okay. With that, we'll adjourn the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair Campbell.